Let's move from that, and as you weigh in on our question tonight, do you think there is a coordinated and consolidated effort in dealing with illegal mining in the country? 072-110-5584. We're joined now by security experts who are going to help us in this conversation. And for that conversation, we have with us the security studies consultant, David Bruce, and forensic private investigator, Ched Thomas. Gentlemen, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time and coming on tonight here on In Focus. I don't know how much of that conversation you heard, and whether or not this is part of the inconsistency in our consolidated effort and coordination, where you would have a municipality in the Northern Cape saying, well, we don't condone people digging because we know things can go wrong. But there is no sense that there is an active enforcement of some degree to ensure that people don't go there and dig, because we believe we need to open the debate around artisanal mining and so see how we can actually formalize this particular space. Is this part of our problem in seeing this particular activity continuing and maybe even escalating? Ched?
A very good evening to you. Look, it's a expansive problem, and every time there's a serious incident, we see police resources thrown at that particular problem. We saw it last year with the rape in Krugersdorp. We've seen it now with the shootouts that have occurred in Riverlea. But there isn't a proactive stance that's been taken. It's a problem that needs to be considered from a multitude of factors. South Africa has an abundance of mineral resources. We've had commercial mining in this country since 1850. 1995, 40.5% of all of our exports were mining related. We had over 600,000 people employed in the mining sector. That's dropped to 400,000. We still have these abundant resources, and we need to figure out a plan from a holistic perspective as to how this is going to be effectively mined and effectively put together as a strategy, rather than throwing resources at problems that are emerging when we know for a fact that illicit mining is taking place on a massive scale throughout South Africa. We can't just throw police resources at incidents that happen. We need to address this from a very high perspective.
Yeah. What is our current strategy, David? And is it a coherent strategy to tackle illegal mining? Please unmute for us there, David. I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I know the full answer, because what the impression that government gives is that its mode of responding to the overall crime situation is very much an ad hoc one. So, what will happen is that there'll be a crisis of some kind, as illustrated in this case in a specific area, and then policing resources will be, thrown at that particular crisis. That seems to be the general character of how government and the police are responding to many of the facets of the crime problem at the moment. So, there isn't an overall strategic vision about, for instance, questions about crime priorities. There isn't an overall strategic vision around how to strengthen the policing system in order to tackle any of these problems more effectively. And so at the end of the day, this is just one example of a whole array of, crime problems where, the police and government are not responding in a really kind of considered and effective way.
Yeah. So, Ched, currently one will look at the Riverlea situation and say we are dealing with a violent crime problem and maybe to an extent a territorial integrity problem. But as you mentioned, this is a far-reaching problem. You have the human trafficking element that is attached to this. You've got the money laundering element that is attached to this. You've got the illegal weapon and explosive element that is attached to this. You've got then, of course, environmental degradation. You've got illicit economy and as well as transnational organized crime. What would a dedicated unit be able to achieve that the current operations, the NIU, the TRUT, and the POP are not able to do right now?
Look, David encapsulated the fact that we need a high-level approach to this, and it seems as if we're lacking in terms of an overall national strategy. I indicated at the beginning of this interview that we seem to throw resources reactively every time there's a specific incident that occurs. And I referenced, of course, what had happened in Krugersdorp last year with the rape, and recently what happened in Rivoli. It doesn't help to establish a dedicated unit within SAPS. This problem is far wider than just a policing problem. We need a national summit. All the problems that you pointed out from an organized crime perspective are there. But one must also understand the value that our fiscus is losing. Current legitimate mining in South Africa contributes in the region of about 200 billion rand per annum to our GDP. We don't know how much has been taken out of the fiscus through illicit mining that could be added and be used for social upliftment programs. Yeah. We need to address this problem. Mining is incredibly expensive in South Africa, and the traditional mining methods obviously are not cost effective. If we have to look towards artisanal mining, licensing and safety standards and perhaps formalizing this industry, we may be able to nip some of the problems in the bud. But the problem we have is, like you said, these far-reaching organized crime tentacles have taken control. We look at other industries that haven't been completely formalized, such as the taxi industry, and we see how they contributed to the growth of Isenkabi throughout the country in respect of hits. We're now seeing this massive illicit economy and this ecosystem that's established itself as a result of the illicit mining. We need to monetize this for the fiscus. We need to monetize this for the benefit of South Africans, as well as take into consideration that we do have these resources. How do we best exploit them and perhaps include these people who are involved in the artisanal mining and bringing them into a safe sector? Because like you pointed out, there's human trafficking. You could almost create a parallel where we talk about the sex industry, where if that is decriminalized and people are brought into the mainstream economy, they are protected, they are safer. And like you pointed out, people are being exploited within this illicit mining environment.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct. Actually, that's the one pillar that I didn't mention of all the others that I mentioned. The dilemma with the custom offenses and the tax evasion, which of course speaks to the amount of money that is being lost that otherwise could be used for a number of programs. But David, also from a point of regional and international cooperation, we saw recently the Minister of Mineral Resources saying, well, this amounts to economic sabotage, and I'll take it up with our partners in Lesotho. It's widely been purported to say this is a territorial fight between Zimbabweans and Basutus, particularly there in Rivoli. Why have we not, up until this point, in your view, sat down with our colleagues in the region and maybe even internationally, finding a way of dealing with this and stopping the outflows of these minerals?
Well, you see, I mean, I think maybe that isn't necessarily going to be a helpful way of responding to the problem. It's not clear to me that any of these governments have particularly the capacity or interest in kind of intervening to limit the involvement of their own nationals in this kind of industry. So I think what we need to do is, I think, Chad just suggested some kind of national summit, but there needs to be a much more kind of dispassionate and objective kind of engagement with the problem. There clearly are very serious aspects of, illegal mining that, for instance, the relationship with violence, the relationship with organized crime and so on. And those aspects should be perhaps most prominent in our minds. Beyond that, there are the type of economic considerations. There is the issue, of kind of regulating and formalizing this type of economic activity. So my sense is it's much more at that kind of level that this issue needs to be tackled.
What would that mean then? I mean, would it mean we need to then separate these various aspects, deal with, we say we are dealing with illegal immigration, but we do know how porous our borders are, and that would need to be a separate unit all on its own that incorporates an aspect of illegal miners. We deal with violent crime daily here in South Africa. We know what the statistics say, but there's a component attached to illegal mining that speaks to violent crime. How do we segment all these within the various departments?
You see, I mean, you're asking some quite big questions, and off the cuff, I don't necessarily have an answer to that. But I would say that what insofar as this is associated with transnational organized crime, it needs to be addressed at that level and addressed insofar as there are relationships, transnational cooperation relationships that are enabling South Africa to respond more effectively to the problem of transnational organized crime. That might provide a route for addressing this problem.
Yeah.
Or addressing aspects of the problem.
Right.
Essentially, I think that the broad approach, which looks at regulation and formalization of the overall industry, needs to be at the heart of any strategic response to this.
Yeah. Chad, if we can arrest 37 people in 48 hours, 48 hours, the technical units were there. They knew who to arrest, and they arrested them, right? We know there are some 39 hotspots, maybe more. A number of them are in Gauteng, they're in the northwest. There are some in Limpopo, in the Free State, as well as the Northern Cape now, we know. If we can do that in 48 hours, what is keeping us from doing it every other day?
Look, you pointed out that maybe there's 39 odd hotspots. There are so many entries into this myriad of disused mines throughout both the Witwatersrand Gold Basin, along the main reef, as well as in other areas of South Africa where there's other illicit mining taking place, whether it's diamonds, chrome, etc. It's not something that you can just effect a raid, have those people prosecuted. It's all fair and well to say we're going to put more boots on the ground, we're going to arrest more people, but who's going to investigate the crimes? What are the statutory offences they're going to be prosecuted for? You need to have capable investigators that have less of a caseload. You need to have dedicated prosecutors that have less of a caseload. You need more courtrooms and more court days and more presiding officers. This is not a problem that's going to be resolved by sending in units into hotspots, picking up a few suspects, having them appear before the magistrates, having a press conference and thinking that the problem's going to end there. It's not going to end there. This is a massive, massive problem. It's an economic problem like was discussed earlier and like the erstwhile minister suggested. And we've known about the issues pertaining to mining and the labour force, and the fact that we've got skilled individuals from foreign countries that were engaged in mining lawfully in South Africa. And with the closure of mines, with the decline in employment in mines, they're now using those skills and passing on those skills to organized crime syndicates. It is on such a massive scale that you can't just look at it on a piecemeal basis. It's like a bucket full of holes. You're going to plug one hole, but the water's going to carry on pouring. We need to address this, and that's why I'm calling for all stakeholders to try and come together. It doesn't help to just address it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. So does the... David, final question for you. Does the commissioner have a point here when he says we actually don't have the capacity, right? We heard earlier on the the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters saying, well, we've got enough forces. We've got the public order policing, we've got the tactical teams, we've got the NIU. Those people must go down there, and if there are people who are illegal there, shoot them and arrest those that they arrest, basically. And the police commissioner doesn't know that we've got that capacity because he's just new and doesn't quite know what he's doing. But is the police commissioner telling the truth that we don't have capacity to be able to do that? Maybe we don't even have the guns to be able to respond to the kind of security threat that this is?
Well, the police commissioner is only perhaps maybe only hinting at the limitations of the police to be able to respond to this problem. As you know, it's a far-reaching, it's a aspect of police response to many facets of the crime problem. There's, today we're talking about illegal mining, but tomorrow we could be talking about construction mafias, or we could be talking about the taxi industry, or we could be talking about gender-based violence, or the enormous problem of murder in South Africa. The available policing resources are, in no way the type of policing resources that could potentially provide anything that might look like a comprehensive response to any one of these facets of the crime problem in South Africa. And so, the one, insofar as one wants to improve the police response, one's got to talk about better strategic use of police resources. One's got to talk about professionalizing the police so that we get a better response from those police that we do have. Those are the kinds of things that one needs to start bringing into the debate. But certainly, this is just the analogy of a bucket with multiple holes is exactly appropriate. That any response at any particular location where this activity is taking place is only dealing with one really small facet of the overall problem of illegal mining.
David Bruce, Chet Thomas, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on tonight here on In Focus.